unfortunately, because of unexpected events that, with the current guidelines changing to a higher level, I've not been able to join today. So if you're happy to have the session recorded, please click continue. Related to that, we will only have the presenters visible, so that you don't need to worry about yourselves coming on screen if you're concerned about that for the recording. And we will send the link out to the community of practice and to anybody who's attended this, so you can share with your colleagues who've not been able to join, because then I'm sure will be some learning from the different sites that you would like to share. Now, in terms of the practicalities, you'll see that there are two functions at the bottom of the screen. One's for Q&A and one's for chat. Now, because this is a webinar function on Zoom, if you need to communicate a technical issue, please could you use the chat function. And that's going to be monitored throughout by one of the iThrive programme team members, and we'll be able to attend to that as soon as possible. But if you have a question or reflection on the content of the presentations, then please submit that using the Q&A button at the bottom and indicate who you'd like to address it to. We've got a number of different speakers today, so please do say who you'd like to address it to. If you want to submit anonymously, so that the default position is that your name would come up with your question or comment, but if you wanted to submit it anonymously, then you can select to do that, but you have to actually click for your name not to be shown. And then we've got 10 minutes at the end of each presentation to review any comments and respond to questions. So if something occurs to you during the presentation, do please put it in the Q&A box. And then if you've got any questions or reflections that you'd like to share following the webinar, please do email them to the iThrive national team at ithriveinfo@tavy-port.nhs.uk. So as we've mentioned, we will be sending the slides following the webinar, so you can all have those as well as the link to the recording. Okay, so now on to the agenda. We're really delighted to be able to showcase a range of different examples of fantastic iThrive practice today. A big thank you to Angela and Paul, who've stepped in at very much the last minute to showcase their journey so far across Greater Manchester, because of inevitable changes in the programme with the way that we're all working at the moment. So thank you to them. But we're going to start with Neelam Solanki, presenting Thriving Plus, which is a health and wellbeing resource that's been developed through the COVID-19 journey. Moving on to Angela and Paul, giving an outline of the iThrive implementation across Greater Manchester and their journey so far. And then Bethan Morris is going to give a presentation where she's going to describe the co-production of care plan needs-based grouping information leaflets that have been developed, where the needs-based groupings have been incorporated into care plans for children, young people and families accessing specialist CAMHS services. We're going to take a much needed comfort break then following Bethan's presentation, so that people can get up, stretch their legs, maybe get a cup of tea, do whatever you need to do. And then at 11:15, we'll be moving on to Kirstine O'Keefe's presentation, where she's going to outline how Stockport's parent-infant mental health service is aligned with the Thrive framework. And then we'll come on to a Q&A where you can ask questions of the different panel members and have some closing reflections before aiming to close by midday. So we're looking forward to all the presentations today and look forward to your contributions. Obviously, we know that this is a very different way of working. One of the great things of our community of practice is the relationship building it really facilitates, and we really want to encourage that through the Q&A where possible. So please do give any comments and thoughts as if you would if we're all face to face. So thanks very much for that. So I'm now going to hand over to Neelam to introduce the Thriving Plus Health and Wellbeing resource. So over to you, Neelam. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rachel. So yeah, I'm Neelam Solanki and I am an assistant psychologist within the National iThrive programme. And I want to talk to you about Thriving Plus, which is something that we've developed at the beginning of the first lockdown period, actually. And so we sort of started thinking about this in April and about supporting families. So the background to Thriving Plus was that due to COVID-19, there was a huge influx of resources that were available to children, young people and their families to support their well-being. And it was felt that providing them with all of these different resources coming from a range of different sources, some of which have a real evidence base, are coming from, the NHS, or coming from the government in terms of their guidance. And then there's all of these other resources coming from blogs and other websites, and just the sheer volume of this could feel really overwhelming. So the idea was that COVID-19 has changed the way that we think about managing our own mental health and well-being, but also the way that we access services. So many of you will know, working within healthcare, that referrals to these sorts of services decreased during the COVID-19 period, and that people were looking at other means of support. So the idea was that COVID-19 could be exactly this, to step in when you've got all of these resources coming at you, which could be quite detrimental to a family's sense of control and overall well-being. So Thriving Plus, the aim was for a partnership of the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust, London Borough of Camden, and across the STP of North Central London, to create a webpage to sit on the Tavistock and Portman's website, which did exactly this. To make it easy for families to find mental health and wellbeing resources that might be useful to these challenging times, but to create quite a concise list of these, quite a concise collection, which are reliable, vetted, and coming from somewhere that you can trust, with the knowledge that if you're accessing Thriving Plus to access these resources, someone's taken the time to look through them, taken the time to summarize them and make them as accessible as possible to you as a child, young person, or family. A dual benefit of doing this is that we could align it with a Thrive framework. So I'll show you in a second the webpage itself. So we've got lots of resources coming through, a real range. We've got videos, blog posts, actual guidance. And the thought was that we could map this according to the 5 needs-based groupings. So for people, obviously, who might fall within Thriving, who need some prevention and promotion to keep them feeling safe, to keep them feeling contained, and to keep them feeling as if they have a handle on the situation, which is a terrifying situation, as you all know. You could go within Thriving and have a look at some of these things, focusing on self-care, videos to help explain it a little bit better, resources to help families support younger children who don't know why they've suddenly stopped being able to see their friends and go to play school, this sort of thing. So so within the webpage itself, there were dedicated subpages to each needs-based grouping. And within that, you could do exactly that. With advice and signposting, it would be resources that were advice and signposting. And then moving down to getting help, getting more help and risk support. With Getting Help, for example, there were apps where you could track your progress, which aligns with the fact that Getting Help is supposed to be sort of outcome measured, and it's not the typical health-based outcome monitoring, but you're able to track your progress to see whether this is actually helping you. So the groupings do help to organize the different options that are available and help people to navigate themselves to where they think they might be, but also for them to understand that this is according to their need and not according to a referral that they've had. It is completely dependent on what they feel that they need in that moment. But there's also some movement between these areas to access different resources, and that's okay too. An additional benefit of mapping these resources was obviously the promotion of a shared language when talking about health and wellbeing, particularly in the context of Camden itself being a trailblazer site for the Thrive framework. So really utilising those key terms of the needs-based groupings and of the Thrive framework overall, and using that actually as a baseline to develop the website further to really align it across. So this is a screenshot of Thriving Plus, and as I said, I will take you to it in a second. And it launched officially on the 3rd of March. And that was kind of in its very basic sense. So we had all of the resources on one page. They were all there. They weren't particularly organized. And through the next month, we refined this and developed it further and made it easier for the user. So we ended up with this webpage where we've got, as you can see, a bit of information about Thriving Plus, some information about the needs-based groupings, and then these sub-pages where you can click on each of the needs-based grouping to find those resources. So since our kind of formal relaunch, which was at the beginning of May, we've had over 5,000 page views, 1,000 of which have been repeat page visits. So it's really good to know that people are coming back and continuing to find it useful and continuing to access the resources, and you know, something that is updated quite regularly. Maybe there's something else that can suit their needs at a different time, or maybe their needs have changed. So it's great to know that people are coming back. So there is an average 1 minute and 26 seconds spent, but this does include the bounce rate between other pages. So that's an average of 1 minute and 26 spent on any one page. And I think the stat is that 35% of people do stay within the website, and the others do leave, but that's still a substantial time to have a nosy through and find something that might be really useful to you at that time. Fantastic to hear that 91.3% found fed back that they found it useful. So we do have at the end of each subpage and the front page a chance for people to feedback on their experiences, whether they found it useful, and a chance to offer any additional qualitative feedback, and also to send through their email address if they would like us to respond to them to gain any further feedback to inform the continual development of the webpage too. So crucially, this is used as a part of the Getting Advice and Signposting offer, but can also be used as an intervention, and I'll go on to speak to that in a second. So, one last thing as well. You can see down here there's the sort of timeline of page views. So naturally, it was in the throes of COVID-19 in the first lockdown, this was used much more often, and also with that, the comms for the web page did increase. There was a lot of talk about this, and it was really, really heavily pushed in different areas such as referral meetings via social media. And it's natural that this has died down as there was a return to school and things became a little bit more normalized. But as we enter the second lockdown, literally today, I suspect that there's going to be, there will be a huge sort of redo of the website, making sure that the resources remain relevant, additional comms pushes, and just real effort to get it back out there. So this is an example of the resources, but actually I think it would be great to show you the webpage itself at this point. So this is Thriving Plus. As I said, this is the landing page, giving a bit of information, talking about the needs-based groupings, and then each of the groupings themselves, the subpages, have a list of the resources that are available. So as you can see, it's we've got some websites which provide summaries, and then more specific resources with bereavement, with the idea that this talks about where the resource is coming from, a summary of what it is, and then the link for you to go there yourself. And there, like I said earlier, there is a real range. There's videos. So there's Joe Wicks's, PE glasses somewhere down there, which everyone was using at the beginning, and just overall a really big range of things. So in getting help, like I said, there are a lot of apps which did have discount codes at the time, and Couth and stuff that the trust overall does promote. So yeah, please feel free to have a look at that in your own time. So yeah, that's just talking about some of the more resources that are there. So there was a dual purpose of it being a resource which people could be signposted to, but it was also used as an intervention tool with referred children, young people and their families. So the clinical intake team within Camden, who really have oversight of the referrals that come in, so they do that signposting, but also gather more information on the case, used Thriving Plus as a different signposting option, but also as an intervention to use with families. So I supported on a case where an 11-year-old girl was referred to the service and was screened, and had recent onset of anxiety, a lot of which was to do with COVID-19 and not being able to go to school and not understanding the changes. So the work that was done there was, I, for example, went through Thriving Plus, picked out some really key resources which I felt would be useful for the young person themselves and their family to use together, and then explained that during during a Zoom session, and supported the family to search through and find other things that might be useful, which is a really, really great way to use that time, because it means that the family felt supported and listened to and contained by a service, instead of just being signposted off, because there's that real time to ensure that different resources and is picked according to their need. And throughout all of that, there was a real collaborative effort made to understand that this is what they wanted in that time, that the family felt that this would effectively support their needs at that time. So really emphasizing that shared decision making there too. Had some really fantastic feedback about it, so from families themselves, but also through the website. So the family that I talked to a second ago stated that the webpage enabled a helpful discussion about their difficulties and worries with professionals, but also within themselves. And they felt that it was really considered advice and tools specific to their needs that they could use as necessary and refer back to as needed, which is sort of evidenced by those 1,000 repeat returns. So some really, really great feedback on that, which means that we feel motivated to continue updating this, as it is something that people clearly are using. So that kind of brings me to the end of this. We have, of course, created an implementation story, which can be found on our website for you to read at your own time, which really goes through the entire process of it. So the background of developing it, the way that we went about creating it, its alignment with the principles of the Thrive framework, and then thinking a bit more about the content itself and the feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neelam. That's really a fantastic overview. And now I don't know if anybody has any specific comments or questions that they would like to ask or share. I mean, I was struck by how fantastic that reach is, the 5,000 in a short time frame. And as you say, Neelam, it would be important to think about how that gets promoted again through this next period. But any thoughts or comments from people on the webinar before we move on to our next presentation? No? Okay. Thank you again, Neelam, for that.
Rachel, there is one question just to say, yeah, from Nikki. So does the Thriving Plus site sit within the council website?
There is a link to it through the council website. It actually sits on the Tavistock and Portman website, but there is a very explicit link to it, and it's been heavily promoted through the local authority offer. So it doesn't sit within it, but it has an explicit link. Did you want to say any more about that, Neelam?
No, exactly that. There's a link to it. And I've just seen another question come through about, is it geared more to local services or can it be used more widely? And it definitely can be used more widely. However, as it sits within the Tavistock website, there is some information about the specifics, about the specific support offered within our borough and within Camden services. But that's not to say that the majority of resources can't be used anywhere. So we have, I have colleagues in like Oxley's and Slam who have been using this as well, and using it as a key sort of pool of resources that are useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Neelam, there's another question for you.
So the standardization of the format of information is helpful. Yeah, that was the idea of it. Everything is really, really we've tried to be really, really organized with it. So obviously within the needs-based grouping itself, and then make sure that each resource is first of all alphabetized so people can find something if they need it, but it speaks directly to who the intended audience is, where it comes from, so they know that the source is reputable. So yeah, hopefully families can access lots of great strategies.
Yeah. I've just perhaps if somebody from the programme team could just put the link to the Thriving Plus website in the chat, as well as the case study about it. That might be quite useful for people. And then Peter Spellman has asked, is there advice around children who are fearful to attend school?
Oh, yeah.
Renee?
There certainly is. So especially in the wake of when we did it the first time, there were conversations about the return to school. So a lot of it is about, there's lots of guidance on how to talk to your child, how to address some of their specific fears. A lot of that has obviously sort of changed in the last time where children are at school, but a lot of it is still relevant. There are some really good resources from teachers and educational psychologists as well about the things that they're using with children at school, actually, to sort of manage their anxieties, and offering to parents to do at home as well.
Great. Thank you, Neelam. Thank you for your questions. Keep the questions coming in, and we will come back to the Q&A session. So I can see that there's a couple of additional points coming in, so do keep them coming. But what we'll do now is we'll move on to Angela and Paul's presentation outlining the Greater Manchester iThrive journey so far, just so we can try and keep to time, and then we will come back to the questions in the Q&A. So Angela and Paul, I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent. These slides are up. So we'll do some quick introductions. Many of you, I think I've looked at the participant list, may have seen us before, met us before, seen us update before. So you might be sick of the sight of me, apologies, but never of Angela, obviously. I'm Paul Wallace. I'm Director of Psychological Services for CAMHS in Manchester, Salford and Trafford, but I've also been for the last 2 or 3 years the GM lead, clinical lead for the iThrive programme, which we'll say a little bit more about in a moment. But Angela, do you want to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, hiya, I'm Angela Daniel, I'm the GM iThrive programme manager.
Thank you. So we're going to try and run through this really quite quickly. Angela, as with the rest of the GM iThrive team and the national team, have certainly not been sat still during the lockdown period. In fact, it's enabled an awful lot, as you've just seen from Neelam's presentation, an awful lot of innovative new developments to kind of augment our existing iThrive offer. In GM, what it's meant is we've had lots and lots of opportunities to think about how we deliver things in a different way, and also to develop new materials that we hope are going to be helpful for people. And Angela will talk a little bit about that shortly. I'm just going to do a very quick race through for people who've not had the opportunity to hear about our journey within Greater Manchester. So Greater Manchester is a large city region conurbation that's obviously been in the news very recently with regards to Andy Burnham's attempts to prevent us going into a different tier, but now we're all in the same boat. So, you know, how time flies so quickly. But in 2017, 2018, we were very fortunate to be able to get funding agreed for a collaborative development between ourselves in GM, with the Health and Social Care Partnership, the Anna Freud Centre and the Tavistock Trust, to be able to develop a kind of first of its kind rollout of iThrive principles across Greater Manchester. And that has included or involved fundamentally the development of our programme team. So Angela, Ashley Mutton as our project coordinator, Ravimbo Marume, who's our assistant psychologist, and Sam Gittins, who's our data coordinator. And together with me and Angela, they formed a programme team that we've had in operation effectively for about 2 years now. From September to November, in the kind of forming stage of that process, we were involved in lots and lots of presentations to locality strategic boards, trying to get people engaged and on board with the ideas of Thrive, but also recognising that some of the services already had been developing some of their own programmes of work extremely effectively. And we looked to kind of Manchester and Salford, particularly within the conurbation, but also thinking about Rochdale. Some of the other areas had already been kind of moving on with their journey. So our job was to augment and bring things further on. We've developed outcomes framework and surveys, and they have now become pretty much embedded in our kind of practice. So if you moved on to 2019, so in 2019, we launched one of our primary aims as a programme, which was to expand the training offer from iThrive, the national iThrive training modules. So we did a lot of engagement, a lot of recruitment into setting up of venues, bringing people together to go through the detailed, excellent training that's on offer from the iThrive Academy around advice signposting, risk support, ending treatment, thinking about shared decision making, and we brought together lots of multi-agency partners to engage in that training. So it's been really, really successful in as much as trying to reinforce that shared language, shared ideas about shifting away from our traditional way of thinking about service delivery. We're still obviously on a long transformational journey, so and COVID's kind of introduced some challenges to that, but we've looked to sustainability by recruiting training leads. We've also expanded some of the original kind of thinking about Thrive in terms of recruiting an arts and culture mental health lead to be able to expand and broaden our understanding of what the offer might be around emotional health and well-being. There's lots of stuff on the slides. I will send those out to you, but we've also got, alongside the national community of practice, a successful GM community of practice that has well over 350 members now. So if we go on to 2020, so 2020, obviously, we started off all guns a-blazing. We had various people engaged in the iThrive grids training, and some people may recall that on the day this was taking place, this was when COVID started to have an impact on our system delivery, our kind of normal ways of delivery. And quite soon after that initial face-to-face grids training from Rosa and the national team, that had to be kind of shifted into a more virtual world. But as I said before, that's allowed us to think creatively about the ways in which we deliver. So we've developed an e-learning module for organisations to use to think about an introductory kind of presentation around Thrive. Angela, as you'll see as we go on, has developed a whole system presentation, which has been really, really important in engaging even further some of our key partners in understanding kind of the developments that we've been engaged in. We designed and developed a consultation module that we piloted about 2 or 3 weeks ago, which is a kind of another way of helping engage with partners around the importance of consultation as a method of broadening our mental health offer. Our arts and culture work goes on apace. It's fantastic work delivered by our programme lead there, Kat Taylor. So that's really kind of bringing together lots and lots of different partners from across the arts and culture sector and thinking about how their work helps to broaden the mental health offer, and also how we can evaluate and demonstrate effectiveness to commissioners and others. Lots of other things in Train. We've continued to offer our standard training, our National iThrive Academy training online to GM partners. And I think it feels like it's a really exciting time still, despite the constraints of lockdown. And in some ways, the practical arrangements of trying to bring people together to a physical venue have been somewhat circumvented by allowing people to come together on Zoom or MS Teams in a virtual way. And although it kind of doesn't quite feel the same, does it, as having face-to-face conversations, using some of this technology has really, I think, brought together a broader range, a different range of people. So it's been very welcome. So I'll pass over to Angela for the next part of the presentation.
Thank you, Paul. I am going to go through this quite quickly, so bear with me, you will get a copy of all the slides. But one of the things when we were talking about how do we articulate the Thrive framework, the Thrive concept to across Greater Manchester, is that we decided to do this presentation that brings in a vision of what it could look like. So we know that needs to be activity around the thriving. So this is about what activity needs to happen within localities, what the deliverables that localities need to do about promoting that thriving part of the framework, things around everyone has a role in promoting mental well-being, how emotionally friendly our environments, we could use the public health messages around the 5 ways to well-being, etc. What are the deliverables that we need to have in advice and signposting? Do we know what services we have? Do we know what self-help material we have? What websites, what apps we have? Do we have a single point of navigation? Do we have a digital offer? Within the help and more help, again, mapping what services and offer we have within help, getting help and more help. Are they compliant with NICE guidelines? So this was just a little bit of a picture to get localities to start thinking about what they're doing and what activity needs to happen within their area. And when we look at the risk support, is there a shared agreement within that locality between social care and CAMHS about who these children and young people are? Is there an agreed methodology of training for the teams that would work with these young people in a risk support way? I'm not going over what these different needs-based groupings mean, because I'm sure you all know, and I purposely left that bit out. But what we know is that we've got the framework, which is fantastic. We know what needs to happen with the needs-led groupings, but actually alongside this, we need a system change. So if we're going to broaden the mental health offer, then we need to know what else is out there that we could offer our children and young people. We know not all children and young people will get better in mental health services. So how are we looking into our voluntary sector, our arts and cultural offer, our being active offer? How do we evidence the impact if we are using these different services? And if we do want to broaden, how do we support our mental health system? So how do we get our professionals who are knowledgeable in mental health close to those who work with our children and young people at all times? So how are we connecting them with our education settings, our early help, our voluntary sector? Are we thinking in that way within our localities? We know there's particular projects going on, and I think this is nationally as well as within GM. You know, if you've got mental health support teams being going, how does that fit within that Thrive framework? Do they offer advice and signposting? Do they offer getting help? And if so, how are we connecting them as well back into our mental health system of CAMHS? How are we connecting them with our voluntary sector? How are we understanding what's an option within that place? We know going forward that there will be a mental health lead trained in every school, and as that happens, how are we building a relationship and supporting them to promote and be that lead around mental health and wellbeing within a school setting? So there's a little bit around, and this is about different people having these different projects. As these projects come out, if you put them within the Thrive framework, you're automatically naturally connecting them and understanding what that system looks like and where connections need to happen. So and this one, I'm not going to go through all this, but what I was trying to say here was for my GM colleagues really was that there's lots of different programs of work going on across Greater Manchester, and we need to use the Thrive language when we talk about it, about anything to do with mental health and wellbeing, and that helps and supports localities in embedding them within their locality and understanding where they fit within that framework. So we've got the closer link within a place. So we've got the how to get our mental health professionals closer to those working with children and young people within a place. But also we know there's some groups of young people who are more at risk at developing mental health issues. So how are we getting our mental health professionals closer with those teams that work with those groups of young people who are more at risk of developing mental health issues? So how are we getting our mental health professionals sitting in our youth offending services, social care, etc. So this is something for each of the localities to be thinking about. And that was a little bit around that consultation module that Paul mentioned before, and that supports the strategic thinking about how do we commission it, how do we commission and support consultation to actually happen. And what it does is if we do build this infrastructure, it also supports other developments such as trauma responsive services, trauma-informed services, adverse child experiences training that I know is starting to be rolled out across Greater Manchester, but I know across the country as well. And how do we get the support of our mental health professionals to the system who are going to be having training such as trauma and adverse childhood experiences. So that was very, very quick, by the way. And like I said, you will get a copy. But the overview of the programme and what we cover is that we support implementation within localities, and we do that with implementation plans. We have a Thrive leader within every locality. We do coaching. We have a shared vision, which is really has been key. We have community of practice where we share what's happening across GM and what's working. We share what's happening nationally. We have a community engagement strategy and plan, which we have newsletters that go out and engage our community of practice. And we have Thrive champions. We have a Thrive Academy, as Paul said before. We have modules, but we're also thinking about modules, not just modules that training, but modules that get our system leaders to be thinking strategically about what needs to happen within that locality to help support implementation of Thrive. We're looking at broadening the offer, and that's, as Paul said before, the arts and culture programme, our voluntary sector, building those relationships and mapping what's available. We have evaluation is key to this, so we have a really comprehensive outcomes framework. We have surveys that go out to our children and young people, our workforce, our wider workforce. We have now an arts and culture mental health evaluation kit. We do implementation stories, and we commission PhD students to evaluate. And then the other part was a connection, because there's lots of other programs going on, and the more that I present about Thrive, you can see the connection of these programs. I mean, only last week I've had meetings around commissioning services for the youth offending service, and these are all sit in different parts of the system. But by bringing the Thrive framework and then bringing it into that focus and applying that concept really does support the connectivity of the system. So do you want to pick up the next steps, Paul?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, so I mean, it's a whistle-stop tour of loads and loads of work that we've been doing and building up over the last 2 or 3 years. But in terms of the vision, of the ideas that we've got to continue with alongside all of that other work, are a clear set of standards that we're using with each of the 10 localities to try and benchmark where people are up to with regards to their Thrive journey. And that's augmented by sending out surveys to young people, to users, to leads, to providers, to find out in lots of different ways how they're managing, lots of prompt questions to kind of find out where people are up to in terms of their understanding about Thrive. And that's part of our evaluation process. We're developing alongside the consultation module a number of other modules, so we think that it's a helpful process in expanding and developing and broadening the offer to look at a participation module to encourage services and providers to be thinking much more creatively about the involvement of children, young people and families. We've talked a lot about arts and culture, but we're developing a module to look a bit more, I guess, more kind of critically and formally about how to develop kind of standards and processes around engagement with arts and cultural colleagues. We are encouraging regular locality reports, so our engagement with our iThrive champions in each of the localities should also be kind of matched with a locality report that gives us just updated information about how things are going in Bolton or Stockport or Manchester, wherever it might be. One really exciting development that the national team, Rachel, others are involved in is around the idea of extending Thrive principles into all age populations. And we are at the stage where potentially the GM partnership, along with national colleagues, are interested in potentially piloting the use of Thrive language, Thrive principles in at least some defined population groups within the adult sector. So that's a really exciting development that we'd like to continue reporting on. From a trauma and adversity point of view, Greater Manchester has been very heavily invested in thinking a lot about trauma and adversity, not just ACEs, but also the impact of complex trauma, single incident trauma, the resilience hub development since the Arena attack and now post-COVID. And we're looking at very much how the trauma and adversity agenda links or sits alongside the iThrive principles. As we've talked about before, we've done an e-learning module, but actually we want to expand that and think about all of our training offer as being available via one portal, an e-learning platform that would include the delivery of the core national modules, other modules as they develop, but also potentially a learning space for people to access for action learning set discussions or post-training kind of seminars, etc., etc. And all of this is kind of leading us to, as you would anticipate, a real kind of robust evaluation alongside the national team around the proof of concept. So, you know, we were all kind of, I guess, heavily invested in the importance of this shift in terms of shared language, a shared set of priorities, and conceptually, this idea that it broadens the mental health offer for children and young people. But there is something really important, both for us locally, but also nationally, about how this sits in terms of a broad evaluation of impact, of reach, of proof of concept. So we're heavily engaged in that as well. So I'll stop there, but hopefully that's given you a broad overview of what's going on in Greater Manchester alongside our national colleagues.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul and Angela. That's a really comprehensive overview of all the fantastic work you've been doing across GM, which is no mean feast across those 10 localities. Now, I'm mindful that was a very, very rich presentation and no doubt prompting lots of thoughts, comments and questions. But we do need to keep to time, so I'm going to move on to Bethan's slot now. But if you've got any questions that you would like to ask of Angela and Paul in relation to that work across GM, do please put them in the Q&A box and we will make sure we come to them. So I'm now going to introduce Bethan Morris, who is going to give an overview of the care plan needs-based grouping into the needs-based groupings information leaflets for care plans. I'll hand over to Bethan, thank you.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Bethan Morris and I'm an assistant psychologist with the National iThrive programme team. And today I'm going to talk about the development of some care plan needs-based grouping information leaflets, which is a bit of a tongue twister, that we've been supporting the development of. Okay, so a little bit of a background as to why we've been doing this work. So this has taken place at the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust. And we held a service user participation group last year, and there was feedback from service users about what actually having a lack of understanding about the needs-based grouping that was on their care plan. So here you can see what I've circled is what comes up on care plans is category of care, thrive, and then you'd either have getting help, getting more help, or one of the different needs-based groupings. And when this was presented to children and young people, they just didn't necessarily know what that actually meant for their care. So what we really wanted to do was make sure that there was a shared language and create resources so that they could be sent out with their care plans so that children, young people and their families would have an understanding of the type of help or support that they were receiving. So yes, the aim was to develop leaflets to send out with care plans, as I said, and ensure that there's a shared language across the system, because also these care plans will get copied into GPs. They might go to schools as well, just so that there's an understanding across the system about the type of help or support that's being received. And what we wanted to do was make sure that there were two different distinct versions of the leaflets, so applicable to young adults, parents and carers, and then also have an easy read version for children and young people, children with children and also learning disability and ASC services. And we were tasked to support the development of this, and key to this development is collaborating with children, young people, parents and carers to see what would actually be helpful to them as they will be in receipt of these leaflets. So we also found that the category of need as comes up on the care plan at the moment isn't necessarily clear and aligned with the language of the Thrive framework. So what we've done is put in a request to our kind of care plan change kind of service, so that we're going to change it to Thrive Framework needs-based grouping. So just to kind of reaffirm that kind of shared language, and with the leaflet, so that it's consistent, the language is used throughout. So to enable a bit of a springboard for discussions with the service user participation group that we held at the Tavistock and Portman, we drafted some kind of template leaflets just to see what children and young people would feel about receiving these leaflets. And really it's like what they could look like, what information they could hold, and really just wanted something. We thought it would be helpful just to have something to look at before discussing what would be helpful, as sometimes just having a kind of a question as to, with creating these leaflets, might be a bit hard to imagine what they could look like. So we held the service user participation group back in June, and where we showed these leaflets, and we asked them the following questions. So, what are your first impressions of the leaflets? Does the wording make sense, and is it appropriate to the target audience? Would the leaflet like this be useful for you when you received your care plan? And what do you think about the look of the leaflets, and what improvements do you think should be made? So here you can see some of the comments from the service users about what they thought of the leaflets. And there was some really helpful feedback thinking about, okay, it'd be great if there's pictures with the comments and kind of the speech bubbles that are talking about what a different needs-based grouping type of help or support would look like for them. The term help doesn't necessarily explain who the support is from and what that might look like. And I think the feeling was that you don't necessarily know who is going to support you, where that's going to take place, and having a bit more information about that would help children, young people and their families know what type of support that they're receiving. Also explaining what needs-based grouping means. And I know from my experience, I'm very, very kind of well versed in the language of the Thrive framework, and it kind of goes over my head sometimes that needs to be explained further. So making sure that it's really clear what that actually means, and having clear different distinctions of what the different needs-based groupings are. So having a statement saying thriving, and then also thriving means X. And then also thinking about who are the people, thinking about the orange comment. So people are really worrying about me. That was related to the getting risk support grouping kind of explanation. And who are these people? So having a bit more of an explanation about the network around the child or young person that might have those worries about them. And then moving on, we also wanted to get feedback from clinicians. So we posed the same questions to clinicians to get their feedback. And as you can see, there's quite positive feedback about the leaflets, but also an awareness that the distinctions between them, it wasn't very clear that there was a kind of a child-friendly version. And it's clear that we needed an easy read version and not so many words, more pictures. So that's something that we're going to be working on. And then also they liked that the kind of the review process, that the fact that that it kind of enabled clinicians to say that, okay, we are going to be reviewing your care plan, and that there's a plan in place to do this as well. Okay. So as a result of the feedback that we gained, you can see that we've quite dramatically updated the different leaflets to really incorporate the feedback that we received from the participation group. So we've added, you can see we've added some pictures within the speech bubbles. And what we're doing now is working with our communications team at the Tavistock and Portman, so that they can support us into developing an easy read leaflet. Because I think you can clearly see the one on the left, which is intended for children, is much too wordy, and we do really need to have an easy read version. So that will be a great resource to use in the future. And thinking about next steps, so as I said, we are enlisting the support of our communications team to support the development of an easy read leaflet. We also want to have another service user participation group to take these leaflets to, just to finalise the design and the wording, just to make sure that it will really be something that's useful for them. We want to pilot the leaflets within a team, just so that we can get more feedback and see whether we do need to have another iteration of them before they're rolled out across the trust. And we also want to translate the leaflets into different languages so that it is a really accessible tool as well, and thinking about diversity and equity as well. And at the moment, so as these leaflets are in process, we are drafting the implementation story, documenting their development, but obviously we need to kind of fit in the end results of this development process. But there will be an implementation story of the development of these leaflets, and the leaflets will also be available to members of the community of practice to utilise, and we'll obviously let you know about when they're available and how you can access them. And I'd really like to invite you to share your feedback on the leaflets as well, whether you think something like that might be useful to you and would be a resource that you would use. Okay, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Bethan, for a very good overview of the development of those co-produced leaflets. Now, we have run over ever so slightly. I'm mindful that we did talk about taking a comfort break a little earlier. So perhaps if we just literally take a couple of minutes, it's 11:26 now, if we come back at 11:30, sorry about that, but it gives you time just to stretch your legs and take your eyes off a screen. But if you have any comments or feedback around those leaflets that, as Bethan mentioned, it'd be really great to hear it. So please do put your thoughts or comments in the chat. And if you've got any questions for the Q&A, then please do put them in the Q&A box and we can pick those up. So do feel free, stretch your legs. I'll switch my camera and mic off and go make a cup of tea myself. And we'll all come back at 11:30. So see you all soon. Don't go, please do stay. I know that some people will have competing demands, but we've still got further presentations and opportunities to think about what you've heard so far. All right, thank you very much. See you soon. Okay. Well, I hope everybody managed to stretch your legs. Now we're going to move on from the comfort break to hear from Kirsteen O'Keefe about how Stockport's Parent Infant Mental Health Service is aligned with the Thrive framework. So I'll hand over to Kirsteen, who's a specialist health visitor with Stockport NHS Foundation Trust.
I'm here.
Great, fantastic.
I'm here, but I think you have to put my video on. It won't let me.
Okay, Kerry, can you?
Yes, bear with me 1 second. Sorry.
Oh, welcome, Kirsteen. Anyway,
Thank you. That's fine. Don't worry. I'm happy not being on video, so don't worry.
There we are, Kirsteen. That should all be done for you.
Yeah. Can you see me?
Yes, we can. That's fantastic.
Hi.
Over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I haven't got any slides today, but I just wanted to talk about our service, which is the Infant Parent Service in Stockport, but also the Stockport Integrated Parent Infant Mental Health Pathway, which was developed in May 2019. So it's a live document and it's based on the Thrive framework. Okay, so I'm a specialist health visitor in the Infant Parent Service, and our pathway is across all of Stockport family, which includes social care, midwifery, the specialist perinatal and infant mental health team at Wythenshawe, midwives for mental health, health visiting, home start, social care, voluntary sector. So it's a live document that is shared by everybody. Okay, and each service has mapped out their own offer within the document. I can probably send that document to people if they are interested in it. And so we base it all on the Thrive model. And within the document, we've got all the referral forms, phone numbers for every service. So when we look at the big picture, we're looking, our service is 0 to 5, and actually at the moment it's 0 to 2. But when we look at the big picture, those early relationships are so crucial for everything, aren't they? For school readiness, for future mental health, for resilience, for maintaining relationships in later life, for child's development. And it starts, well, when does it start? It's chicken and egg, really, isn't it? But if we say antenatally, so the most important time is antenatally till the age of 2. And so this pathway is based on a wealth of evidence, including the 1001 Critical Days Manifesto, important information documents such as the Embrace report. It's based on the NICE guidelines of 2014, the CG 192, which says that we all have a responsibility to inquire about persons' mental health if we're working with them. And so it was developed as a guide for all these services to use, so it makes it easier to know who to refer to when to refer. Okay, so what we want to be doing here is trying to promote good infant mental health across the whole of Stockport, and also to promote positive infant-parent relationships. And so the guide is really for 0 to 5 years old. It enables us to have incorporate a whole systems approach to working with parent and infant mental health. And so it was developed with a task group, including people from all those services, so a representative from all those services. Okay, so if I just tell you a little bit about the infant parent service within that. So I'm the health visitor and I work full time. The clinical lead is Emma Arnold, who's a clinical psychologist. And we also have Christine Chester, who's a child and adolescent psychotherapist. And then 1 day a week, we have Stacia Stobbs, who's an assistant psychologist in HIMSS at Stepping Hill. We don't have any admin, so we're a very small team for the whole of Stockport. And the way we work is we accept referrals from anybody, so it's usually health visitors, social workers, can be speech and language therapists, psychologists, even psychiatrists have referred into our service where there's a concern about the relationship between parent and baby, parent and infant. So at the moment we're working 0 to 2 because one of the members of staff is off sick, unfortunately. So it's just 0 to 2. So when we accept that referral, we have a weekly team meeting and we discuss the referral and see where's best placed. It may be it's not an appropriate referral because there's no problem with the relationship between parent and baby, and it may go back to the referrer with some advice as to who else we can think about within that pathway within Stockport. If it's for us, then we're looking at that Thrive model. So we're looking at the getting advice stage maybe, and it may be that we have the consultation with perhaps a health visitor, and we may be thinking about what the health visitor can do in that situation. So every health visitor in Stockport is trained in the neonatal behavioural observation, which is where they it takes about 10 minutes to do, and they can do parts of it as well, where we can look at how the baby is coping with its environment or reacting to its environment. And this can also help, you know, there's evidence to show that this helps build the relationship between parent and baby, to help parents to see what their baby's trying to communicate to them. So that might be the getting advice stage. Sorry, if we go back to thriving, we offer training to everyone in Stockport. So we offer the Institute of Health Visiting Perinatal and Infant Mental Health training, which we've had a social worker on board in the team. We've had a consultant obstetrician, we've had midwives and health visitors, and we've delivered that to 200 of Stockport family from October last year to February. And our hope was to continue that yearly to any new members of staff. Obviously now we have to think about how we're going to do that differently. So we offer training, not just that training, we offer things like Watch Me Play, we're offering to early years workers and health visitors. We offer antenatal attachment training. So lots of training about infant mental health we offer in the thriving bit. And so just trying to think, so then after the consultation, if we are concerned, if the practitioner's concerned and we're concerned, then we either offer to do a joint visit with that practitioner, or we'll do direct work with the family, which may be video interactive guidance, it may be infant parent relationship work, maybe work around baby bonding, helping parents to see what their baby's trying to tell them through their behaviour. So if a baby's got feeding difficulties, it's very easy to just completely medicalise this, and it could be a medical reason, but very often it's not. Sometimes there's something else going on that parents aren't noticing what the baby's trying to tell them when they're feeding, that kind of thing. We can also offer, obviously, Watch Me Play in the home environment. We are doing home visits. We all wear PPE and we are doing home visits, but over this period now we've phoned parents and we've also done video consultations with parents, which actually I found has worked really well. We have very close links with the midwives in Stockport, midwives for mental health. So the family midwife may refer into the midwife for mental health if they're worried about the parents' mental health, and if it's mild to moderate, then it may be that there was a referral into IAPT, Healthy Minds. The midwife for mental health may still see them in the clinic. She also will see parents, mainly mums actually, who have a moderate to severe mental health difficulties, and she does joint clinics with the psychiatrist from Wythenshawe. Every health visitor will be referred anyone who has any mental health difficulties, so they will have a targeted antenatal visit, and they can again access our service for consultation with that. So we do either short-term or long-term work with the family, and we have routine outcome measures such as the MORS, which is the maternal observation scale, sorry, I can't remember what that is, but we're looking at warmth and invasion in the relationship, and we measure that at the beginning and at the end. And we work collaboratively with anyone else who's working with the family. So very often there will be someone from the specialist perinatal community mental health team and the health visitor. Postnatally, obviously antenatally, it might be a midwife, and we work with them as well. The other routine outcome measures we use for babies is the ASQ-SE, which is the social and emotional developmental questionnaire. So there's loads of questions, but we don't just use it as questions, it opens up conversations. So one of the questions might be, does your baby arch its back when, or I think that's just a question, does your baby arch its back? And so we might ask a little bit more about that. When does baby do that? And it opens up those conversations. A lot of will be about crying. Again, babies cry, that's normal. It's just trying to help parents very early on before these problems continue. And then obviously then when we think about people who are here today working with older children, when we look back at when they were a baby, I wonder what they were like as a baby. I wonder how they were parented. Sorry, on the consultation as well, we do a risk assessment. So we're looking at things that have happened for the parent in their past, how they were parented, what's happened with parents. We're looking at risks, but also we're looking at protective factors as well. Are they willing to change? Are they engaging with services? We look at the infant, we look at the infant's temperament, and we look at the risk factors for that. So they may be preterm or have special educational needs. And we also look at the parent-infant relationship. So I'm conscious of the time because it's easy to waffle on here for ages. So I think we'll leave it at there for now. You got anything to ask me, Rachel?
No, not at all, but I'm just mindful that you've got a brilliant implementation story that showcases the work that you've done. And I think we do have a slide that we could just highlight for everyone. So the link to the implementation story that Kirsty's just been describing the service of is in the chat. And but Kirsty, if you want to say anything about this implementation story, and or should we just encourage people to?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's basically what I've just said, really. But what we do as well in our team, which is fantastic, was we have bi-monthly meetings with a representative from midwifery, specialist perinatal mental health team, IAPT, health visiting, Home Start. I do Home Start, joint Home Start with joint training with Home Start as well. So it's really good, and it's a live document, so we're having to update it constantly because things are changing so rapidly.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And of course, we know that particularly perinatal services are so extremely busy during these times. So thank you very much for taking the time out and sharing your work with us across Stockport. Okay, thank you, Kirsty. So what we'll just move on to now, if people have any comments or reflections on the presentation that Kirsty has just given, please put them in the chat. If you've got any specific questions for the Q&A, do post them there. And we have got some questions that have been posted in the Q&A. So I wonder if you could perhaps show the panel, and if somebody from the team could look in the chat for some of the questions that were posted in the chat, because they're not all within the Q&A. But Nikki Seeley asked a question, I think it was to you, Neelam, around how did you manage the logistics of gathering the variety of resources?
Yeah, so that was actually quite a challenging task, where we had like a kind of project team working within the Tavistock, and basically just shot off emails to all the team leaders and wellbeing leads to send through anything that they had, because we were aware that different teams had sort of collections of resources that they were using on their various shared drives. So they got sent through to myself and Bethany. And then we spent like quite a decent chunk of time going through each of them, putting them all into a spreadsheet, saying whether we thought they were suitable or not, which was then sort of checked by a clinical member of staff, at which point we then wrote them up and put them onto the webpage. So yeah, it was a long task, but like partnership working was so key within that, and everyone's willingness to send them through and take the time to continue sending things through if they found something that was interesting. So that really enabled that continuous sort of update as well.
I think it's important to stress that it was a cross-sector initiative, wasn't it? So all providers across the system were invited to share resources, so that it was very much holistic to think about the different needs of the population. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Neela. So next is a question from Georgia. Were there specific digital elements that supported this journey? Now, I'm not sure if that was directed to Neelam's presentation or to Paul and Angela's, which I suspect, yes, I'm getting nods, that it was directed to you, Paul and Angela, in relation to the journey across GM.
Sorry, just looking at unmuting. We always have to have that little bit of search of one person not unmuted in time, don't we? So digital elements, I'm guessing that you're talking about digital offer to children and young people, some of that digital front door. So as a GM program itself, we're not using the the digital elements, but localities are, and we're encouraging to think about a digital offer for children and young people, because we got back from our surveys, majority still prefer face-to-face, but there is a percentage, I think it was 15% from our surveys, that prefer digital. So we have got localities looking at that, and Manchester is one of those who are looking at a digital front door. So Paul might be able to tell you a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the other element to it is to say that we've had confirmation over this last period of time that all the GM localities can access Couth, which is obviously not in all areas of the country, but is pretty widespread in terms of a digital resource for children and young people. And we have had some discussions kind of relatively early on in lockdown about the use of chat health as well as a resource around children and young people's mental health, but that at the moment hasn't progressed significantly. So we are looking to Couth, and I guess partners in other agencies like 42nd Street who potentially have some digital access, but also our Manchester, what we're calling mThrive, which is our version of delivering services into locality hubs, as also having a digital offer as well as kind of a face-to-face kind of actual locality offer as well.
Thank you very much, Paul and Angela. The next question does come to you both as well, actually. So Siri has said, it's great to hear all this about GM, including the involvement of arts and culture. Does this include sports and physical activity, or is this something you plan to include more in the future? And I know we've got GM moving in action, haven't we? So perhaps if you want to say a little bit about that, which would be great.
Yeah, absolutely, it needs to include activity, and we are mindful. So we have concentrated within the programme about arts and culture, but we have linked up. There's a big GM programme called GM Moving, which is all about trying to get people more active in various ways. And it doesn't mean active just sports wise, but just even getting out for walking and various different things. So we have linked up with that programme, and that's one of the things I think is an important angle of the GM programme, is to start linking into other programmes and bringing that into the Thrive framework, understanding how it promotes and supports mental health and well-being.
And just to add to that very quickly, Angela, as Angela said, there's a real kind of drive to, if we're going back to the Anna Freud self-care website and thinking about all of those resources that young people cited as additionally helpful to thinking about their health and well-being, emotional health and well-being, tying in not just arts and culture, not just movement and activity, but other things about the built environment, about kind of spaces and places and all of that kind of stuff. We're fortunate enough to have a kind of health and well-being or program within GM as well, which is looking at that broad environmental, patching all of these different aspects together. And I know other cities around the country will have done a kind of a similar thing around well-being offers generally. So we're trying to see how Thrive can be a model that can be imported or thought about or incorporated in terms of the language into that kind of broad well-being offer across communities.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Very helpful, and Angela on GM moving there. So next in the Q&A, we've got a question from Tim, addressed to you, Paul, about mentioning the outcome frameworks and whether it could be shared, and also how you collect these remotely and the systems that you use. And I know that this is something that we've been talking about developing an implementation story for, and perhaps this is the nudge that we need to actually create that implementation story and the outcomes framework, because I think it's a common question across sites, but no pressure there, Paul, but it'd be good to...
I'm going to pass to Angela.
Yeah, so it's quite a comprehensive outcomes framework, and we've decided, because we're trying to do a whole system, we need to try and collect that system change. So we have the self-assessment that the national team have developed. It's like a maturity matrix that we get everyone to complete each year. So that's a bit about the system change. We have the indicators from our mental health services that are readily available anyway, so access and waiting times, etc. We have some national indicators that, you know, if Thrive is truly embedded over time, it should, you know, influence things like hostel admissions, exclusions, etc. But you can't directly say it's Thrive, but, you know, positively it should impact on those. And then we have a bit where we look at, we want to know how it feels to the workforce. So we've got the strategic vision of self-assessment saying, yeah, we are moving this way. So we do surveys out to our CAMS workforce and our wider workforce. And we say wider workforce, we include local authority, voluntary sector, education settings. And it's questions around that include the Thrive language of shared decision making, advice and signposting, etc., and understanding the Thrive framework. And then we also send surveys to children and people who access mental health services and children and people who are signposted to other services in the system, because that's our broadening in the system. And again, it captures, and we've included in there, we have a young people's charter. So they put about 8 to 10 things that was important to them about mental health. And what we realised is that the things that are important to mental health, if you implement Thrive properly, it does actually support what they are wanting from the mental health system. So the surveys are trying to capture, are we actually doing that? Are they feeling it? And then we're adding more now in, as we say, we've got the arts and culture framework, and we've got the GMI Thrive standards, and that's quite an organic document. So we've put within there what activities should happen, one as a program management, and then within each of the Thrive framework. But we're developing a guidance to it by learning. So we're trying to find out across the localities, okay, so single point of navigation, for example, who's done it, what worked within it and what didn't work within it, what's missing, and then sharing that as a bit of guidance for people who are looking at developing it.
The other very quick thing to add would be that I guess, Tim, I know that you asked that question about the outcomes framework. It might be useful. We'd be quite happy to have a kind of an additional conversation with you at some point about kind of how we develop that. So that's not a problem.
Great. But I think that implementation story is also something we need to progress, isn't it? Because I know other sites are also interested. So, okay, we can think about how we take that forward outside of this webinar. But thank you very much, and good to get the nod of your head there, Paul. Okay, brilliant. Thank you all very much. So there is a follow-up question on the Q&A from Nikki. Do you think there's scope to include education and transitions into the framework? I would like to link all schools and early year settings into a locality-based approach that incorporates all community resources. Absolutely, that's at the core of the Thrive framework to do that. So thank you for that query. Then there's a couple of more questions within the chat. So just going through from the top. Okay, so some positive feedback about the Thriving Plus, and then will the website continue to be updated with relevant resources into the future beyond the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think that's the plan, definitely, because a lot of these, you know, if COVID-19 suddenly is you know, there's a vaccine or it goes away, it doesn't mean that obviously the mental health and well-being issues associated will, because this is, you know, everyone's kind of aware that this is going to have quite a lasting impact. So Thriving Plus ideally would follow that journey of the different pulls on mental health and well-being across the time span. So yeah, that is definitely the idea.
Yeah, and I think I would add to that there is a genuine commitment, and there's been some investment in developing a website across the integrated care system of the STP geography in North Central London, which incorporates 5 of the London boroughs to work collaboratively to do that piece of work. So it's hard to imagine you know, what that's going to be like in the end, but it will be incorporated for all of those localities and include national resources as well as ones specific to those localities. So then Kat posted the link for the youth mental health arts and culture evaluation in GM that you can click on that link, and we can put that perhaps in some, we'll do a summary of today's webinar and circulate, so these links we can save the chat and distribute these as well. Then let me just see. My chat seems to have frozen. No, it's moving there. Any other questions? No. Great. So Tim, fantastic. Okay, so quite a busy webinar, lots of information provided. We were probably slightly ambitious, as is often the way when you're delivering things remotely. You think you can get through a lot more, but it just doesn't leave the same opportunity for reflections, comments and feedback. So we've taken it to the wire, but I'd really like to thank all of our presenters for their fantastic overview of local implementation of Thrive. So Neelam, Angela, Paul, Bethan and Kirstine, huge thank you from me and from all the people who joined the webinar for your contributions today. We would really like to get some feedback on the webinar. We know we've just got a couple of minutes left, but obviously this is the 3rd webinar that we've now delivered through the community of practice. And we'd just like to get some feedback from you in relation to your experience of the webinar. So if you wouldn't mind logging on to www.menti.com and use the code 366521. So actually 201, not 21. So yeah, you just go into www.menti.com and use that code. I'll just check that. Please don't be biased by other people's feedback. Be as honest as you can. We like constructive feedback to really help develop our webinars. So as people are logging on, please do. There's 26 participants. We'd like as much feedback as we can get. But if you'll just log in and we move on to the next question, so that as people log in, you can still, oh no, you can't, I'm being told not, we have to wait. So we would like more feedback, please. So please do log in to www.menti.com and put the code in, and please give us your feedback. If it's not helpful to you, we would want to know as much as if it's helpful. You know, it's really important, and there will be an opportunity for you to give some narrative about how you would like to improve it. So we want everybody's feedback, positive and constructive criticism, and anything negative that you might have had from today's webinar. So please do take the time. It's really important to us, and it means that any webinars that we deliver can really meet your needs in a more helpful way. So thank you very much to everybody who is contributing to that. So if we perhaps move on now to the next question. So are there any particular areas that were helpful? So you may well have not found it particularly helpful overall, but there might be some areas that you did find helpful. And you know, please do just put in some comments around that. Thank you. Okay, so hearing about the whole system approach, Thriving Plus resources, hearing from sites about their work was motivating, great. Hearing about Thriving Plus, sharing best practice, hearing similar challenges to ours. Young person engagement leaflets really in line with what we're doing. Brilliant, and that's a really important bit of feedback, because what we want to do is use these forums to share learning so that sites across the country are not reinventing the wheel, that we can work together as a community of practice to support each other in really improving services aligned with the Thrive framework. So hearing about how to broaden the mental health offer. Implementation story is new to me. Having one for GM outcome framework will be valuable. Great. Okay, Paul, pressure. I like this pressure to create more stories. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, that's all really helpful feedback. Also, we'd like to know if there are any particular areas that could be improved on the webinar. So any thoughts that you might have that would be useful for us in our ongoing development of working in this new way. It'd be really helpful. Okay, so maybe breakout rooms to discuss in more detail. Yeah, we did wonder about that, but with the time constraints, we feel it's a challenge. It'd be good to, if you want to give any comments actually, so the balance of keeping the webinars brief so that people can come in and leave and it doesn't impact on their working day, and also having that capacity to, well, not having to sit in front of a screen versus having more time to perhaps segment into breakout rooms. Please do give any comments around that. It'd be really helpful. Would like more time on the GM, more time for discussion. Interesting. Yeah. Tricky to keep following narratives when people don't have slides. Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that. Small groups following presentations around themes. Yeah. Great. Mentimeter is great. Interaction is so useful. Yes. Yeah, so trying to find ways to bring interaction in this new world. Maybe we need to build in more Mentimeter into each, as well as having some forum for discussion. Well, this is great feedback for us to take away and really think about how to improve our webinar. So thank you. Do, if you're still in the middle of typing, please do continue with that, because I think we can still capture, if you give that feedback now. I'm getting a nod. Yes, we can. So please do continue to give your feedback on any areas that you think we could improve, and we will absolutely capture that and take it on board. Really helpful to us, and also for other sites across the country who are also launching their local community of practice. So thinking, for example, with Paul and Angela, in a similar way, the feedback that we receive can really inform local community of practice events as well. So please keep those ideas coming. Really rich to hear from you all. So I should draw it to a close. We have overrun 4 minutes. Apologies for that. But thank you very much for being here and contributing. And it sounds like it's been really useful to the majority of people. So really great to hear that. Thanks again. And we'll see you next month with a focus on digital. Oh gosh, somebody help me with the title that we've for our next event. In fact, we should have had a slide, which is going to be, I will hand over.
Digital innovations through COVID-19.
Digital applications through COVID-19. Innovations. And the date for that is the 3rd of December. Thank you, Bethan and Neelam, for coming to my rescue. Hard to hold these things in mind. Great. So we will share that information across the community of practice, and you'll all receive that. Thank you all very much. We'll draw it to a close now. Thanks again.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you to all the speakers.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.